His lips were on my neck, his hands pressing tightly into my thighs, and the sound of my own moans echoed off the hotel walls like a cruel confession. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I wouldn't have also experienced the drill and the feel of it. But there I was, on the bed of the man who wasn't my husband, but his elder brother, just few hours before I would walk down the aisle and promise my life to his younger brother. I'd never felt more ashamed, but at the same time, more alive. Before I tell you my story, I want to formally introduce myself. My name is Madison Blake. I'm a 29-year-old woman from Georgia. I grew up in a small town where girls like me were raised to be sweet, polite, and perfect wives. I always thought I would be. I fell in love with a man who fit the same mold. Ryan, my fiancé at the time, a man of strong Christian values, kind to a fault, and deeply committed to his faith. But there was Jacob, his older brother, 35, rugged, divorced, and dangerous in that quiet, brooding way. Where Ryan was soft-spoken and gentle, Jacob was fire in a tailored suit. He rarely smiled, but when he did, it felt like the whole room shifted. The night before? It was the night before our wedding. The hotel was breathtaking. The presidential suite at the Intercontinental in downtown Atlanta. High ceilings, gold finishes, floor-to-ceiling windows with a skyline view. Our families had all flown in, and everyone was buzzing with excitement. That evening, after dinner and drinks, the girls were in one section of the suite doing last-minute dress fittings and touch-ups. The guys were spread around the other wing, playing cards, drinking bourbon, and cracking jokes. I had stepped away for a moment, needing to ask Jacob something about the wedding rings that he had been keeping safe. I went straight to his room, and I didn't knock. That's where it began. I opened the door to Jacob's room, expecting him to be at the desk or watching TV. Instead, I found him stretched out on the bed, shirtless, his muscular chest rising and falling slowly. His pants were halfway down, and his hand was wrapped around the biggest thing I'd ever seen between a man's legs. It was as the size of a cucumber. Round, long, fat and slippery. He was in ecstasy, moaning and sliding it himself, with a soap by the side of him. He didn't even flinch. He looked me right in the eyes. "Close the door," he said calmly, like it wasn't insane. Like I hadn't just caught my future brother-in-law mid-pleasure. I should have run, should have screamed, should have felt something, anger, shame, anything. But I just stood there, watching, frozen. My heart pounded in my chest like a war drum. My mind screamed no, but my body, it betrayed me. "Did you need something?" he asked, as if nothing strange was happening. My mouth went dry. I was just looking for the rings, I mumbled, and still staring. He gave the faintest smirk and patted the bed beside him. "They're in the drawer, but you look like you need something more." That was all it took. I closed the door behind me like I was closing off the rest of my life. I sat down beside him, my hands trembling. He didn't touch me at first. He let me make the first move. I reached for him. I still don't know why. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the ache I'd buried for so long while waiting for marriage between me and his younger brother, whom we both agreed to a no sex before marriage. Maybe it was the thrill of the forbidden, but once I touched him, there was no going back. I started with my hands, just trying to help him finish, to get it over with. But when his fingers dug into my hips and he pulled me onto him, I couldn't resist him, not once, not even when he whispered, "Tell me to stop." I didn't. I let him pull me under, body and soul. We didn't just have sex, we devoured each other. Like two people starving, he made moans that were low and rough, full of need. And I cried out in ways I never had before. I remember grabbing at the sheets, arching my back, the way his hands felt wrapped around my waist. He didn't stop until I was shaking underneath him, my body wrecked, my voice gone. I came several times. When it was over, I lay there gasping, trying to catch my breath, heart still hammering. He lit a cigarette and looked at me like he owned me now. "Don't worry," he said. "Your little secret's safe with me." I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to hit him. But most of all, I wanted him again. It took everything in me to get up from that bed. My legs felt weak. My dress was wrinkled. My lipstick was smeared. I didn't even look back at him as I slipped out of his room and back into mine. Ryan was asleep when I got there, curled up like a little boy, peaceful. I stared at him for a long time and felt a stabbing pain in my chest. He was pure. He trusted me. He loved me. And I had betrayed him in the worst possible way. That was the beginning. The wedding still happened, but nothing inside me was ever the same again. The music, the vows, the clinking of champagne glasses, it all felt like a dream. A beautifully choreographed lie. I stood there, in my white dress, smiling for cameras, holding Ryan's hands as he said, "I do." With so much love in his eyes, it made my stomach twist. And I said it back. I told him I'd love and honor him, that I'd stay faithful. I kissed him like I meant it. But in the back of my mind, I was still replaying how good I felt on that bed with Jacob. The morning after the wedding, we were supposed to leave for our honeymoon in Maui. I woke up early, expecting to feel butterflies or maybe relief, but all I felt was guilt. A dull, heavy ache in my chest that refused to go away. Ryan was already downstairs, checking us out of the suite, so I went into the bathroom to shower. That's when I saw the faint bruises on my hips from Jacob's grip. My stomach dropped. I touched the marks like I needed proof that it really happened. There was a knock at the door. I opened it. It was Jacob. No words, just a smirk. He looked at me like nothing had changed, like we hadn't just crossed the line of no return. "I forgot to give you something," he said, slipping a small velvet box into my hand. I stared at it, confused. Inside was a delicate gold anklet. The tag still attached. "Something to remember me by," he added with a whisper. I should have slammed the door in his face, but instead I stood there like an idiot, heart thumping. Then, right there in the doorway, he leaned in and kissed me on the cheek, slow and purposeful. My breath hitched. Ryan came up the elevator seconds later. Jacob walked away like nothing ever happened. Maui was beautiful. Turquoise waves, palm trees swaying, romantic dinners by the ocean. It should have been perfect, but I couldn't stop replaying that night in my head. I couldn't stop wondering what would happen when we got back. Would Jacob pretend it never happened? Would I? But no, Jacob wasn't done. The night we landed back in Atlanta, Jacob had texted, "There's a hotel off Peachtree, room 417, Thursday night. You know you'll come." My hands shook. I deleted it, tried to erase the idea, but Thursday came and I was there. Room 417 was dimly lit, candles flickering, music low. Jacob was already inside, sipping whiskey, that same smug look on his face. "You came," he said, walking toward me. "I shouldn't be here," I whispered. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from my face. That night was even more intense than the first. There was a kind of madness in it now, a mix of guilt and obsession. He knew exactly how to touch me, how to say my name in a way that made me forget my own morals. And afterward, I cried in his arms. "You're gonna ruin me," I said. He didn't answer. Weeks passed. I went back to being Ryan's perfect wife. I cooked, cleaned, laughed with his friends, went to church, and smiled in family photos. No one suspected a thing. But behind closed doors, I was meeting Jacob in different hotels around town. Sometimes once a week, sometimes more. Always discreet, always in secret. There were times I tried to stop it. I'd block his number, swear it was over, but then he'd show up at my job, or send flowers to my office with no name, or slip a note into my purse during family gatherings. He always found a way. And the worst part? I let him. I was addicted. It wasn't just the sex, It was how he made me feel. Like I could be someone else. Someone reckless. Someone free. With Ryan, I was a good wife. With Jacob, I was every dirty thought I'd ever suppressed. There were times Ryan almost found out, like the night he came home early from work and found my hair wet and skin flushed. I told him I'd just finished a long bath. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "You smell amazing." Or the day Jacob left a scratch down my back that I couldn't hide. Ryan saw it while I was getting dressed and asked if I'd fallen or something. I laughed and made up a story about a tight zipper. Each lie pulled me deeper into a pit of deceit. I started to hate myself. I'd cry in the shower, then pretend everything was fine 5 minutes later. I couldn't look Ryan in the eye anymore without feeling like a fraud. But Jacob, he thrived on it, on the secrecy, on the danger. He enjoys it. And some part of me too feel elated about the thrill. It's something I have never imagined before. He'd whisper things like, "He doesn't deserve you," or "You come alive with me." He knew just what to say to pull me back in every time I tried to run. It wasn't just guilt anymore. It became fear. Fear of being caught. Fear of losing everything. Fear of the fact that I didn't want to stop. One night, after a hotel meetup, I stared at myself in the mirror. I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. My hair was messy, lipstick smeared, eyes tired. That woman was a liar, a cheat, a coward, but also a woman who was deeply, terrifyingly alive. There's a sound your soul makes when it's on the edge of collapse, a silent scream buried deep in your chest, just waiting for something, anything to let it out. Mine came on a Sunday afternoon. Ryan, Jacob, and I were at his parents' lake house in Tennessee, a weekend getaway, the perfect family picture. Ryan was out back fishing with his dad, while Jacob and I were left inside to set up dinner with his mom. He brushed behind me while I was washing vegetables, and his hand slid across my lower back like it belonged there. A gentle graze, but I felt it like lightning. "Stop," I hissed under my breath. He didn't say anything, just smirked and walked off. Later that evening, when everyone else had gone for a walk by the water, Jacob cornered me in the guest bedroom. The audacity. It wasn't even subtle anymore. "You've been avoiding me," he said. "Because this has to end," I shot back, keeping my voice low. "It should have never started. But it did. And we both know you're not done." I stepped back. "You don't get to control me." He laughed, dark and low. "Madison, I don't have to control you. You come to me willingly. Every time." I was shaking, angry, ashamed. But underneath all of it, still tempted. That's what made it worse. He stepped closer and whispered something that made my blood run cold. "If you try to disappear, I'll tell him, all of it." My heart stopped. I didn't sleep that night. Ryan snored softly beside me, arm around my waist, completely unaware that the woman he called his wife was fighting a war inside her own body. I stared at the ceiling and realized I was trapped. Not because Jacob had something over me, but because I let him. The next morning, Jacob texted me again. "Jacob, room 6112. Last time, you owe me that much." I should have deleted it, blocked him, confessed everything to Ryan, and let the chips fall where they may. But I didn't. I told Ryan I was going to visit a friend for brunch. And I went. Room 612, a boutique hotel in Midtown Atlanta. Clean, quiet, cold. I walked in and found Jacob sitting on the edge of the bed, fully dressed this time, arms crossed. He looked different. Not arrogant, not angry, just still. "I'm done," I said, barely above a whisper. He didn't respond at first. Then he stood and walked over, so close I could smell the cologne he always wore. "No, you're not," he said. He reached for me, and for the first time, I stepped back. "I mean it, Jacob." He stared at me, something flickering in his eyes. Pain, regret? I couldn't tell. "Do you love him?" he asked. My throat closed up. "Yes," I choked out. "And I can't keep betraying him. I can't keep betraying myself." He sat back down. "I was never trying to ruin you, Maddie," he murmured. "I just couldn't help wanting you." And for a moment, I believed him, but it didn't matter. I walked out of that hotel room and never looked back. I haven't seen Jacob since that day. He stopped reaching out. Maybe he finally realized I meant it. Or maybe he found someone else to corrupt. Ryan still doesn't know. He wakes up every day and kisses me on the forehead like I'm the best thing that ever happened to him. And maybe that's the real punishment, living with the love of someone you've hurt this deeply, without them even knowing it. People think infidelity is all about the sex. It's not. It's about silence, the kind that screams inside your soul every single day. To every woman who's walking the tightrope between desire and destruction, I see you. This story isn't a badge of pride. It's a wound I'll carry forever. And maybe one day I'll come clean to Ryan. Maybe I'll give him the truth he deserves. But today, I'm just grateful you listened. Thank you also to the LC community for coordinating a platform like this to enable people like us to anonymously let out a chunk of guilt out of the chest and get to see different opinions from the public, no matter how messy. You've been a mirror and a therapy with love, Madison.